Hey, how's it going? Thank you for joining to listen to this podcast today, this interview I did with Dr. Alice Lee, who's a holistic psychiatrist who primarily helps people who are on psychiatric medications get off them. And she still is a licensed psychiatrist, so she can prescribe the step-down doses in order for people to get off medications if they feel like it's time to stop taking a psychiatric medication. And full disclosure, I met her when I was in the withdrawal phase from Adderall. I was about 8 months into my withdrawal, and I was feeling pretty good, and I went to Dr. Lee to get some support and strategies and learn and better myself. And that was nearly 10 years ago. Flash forward, I write a book about ADD medications and getting off them, and Dr. Alice Lee writes the foreword. And I'm really happy to give her the opportunity to speak to as many people as she can reach. I think she has a really great story. I was really curious about hearing her own experience with Zoloft and how that affected her, how Zoloft affected her, and how getting off Zoloft affected her, and how being in the role of patient helped her become a better doctor, a better practitioner, a better healer, because she understood what her patients were going through because she had been through it too. So stick around, enjoy the talk. If you like this kind of thing, subscribe, like, and participate in any way you can. And I hope you benefit from it and enjoy it.
Beautiful. All right, so thank you, of course, Dr. Lee, for speaking with me. If you could give a brief background as who you are and
Yeah, sure. So I'm a child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist. I was trained at the University of Maryland for my adult psychiatry portion and did that for about 4 years and then went on and I got trained in child and adolescent psychiatry at Children's National Medical Center in Washington, D.C. for another 2 full years. And then afterwards, I did about 8 years of regular psychiatry where I integrated psychotherapy along with medication management. And helped a lot of people both in the private sector as well as in the public, area. I was working at the University of Maryland College campus for a while. And then after about 8 years of more of a conventional psychiatric approach, I started in 2002 to integrate what turned out to be functional medicine. Functional medicine is the use of nutritional supports and working with diet to help people. And then in 2003, my practice evolved again to integrate what most people now call energy medicine. And energy medicine is the ability to understand how energy and information can be shifted and changed through your mind to facilitate healing as well. So once I started integrating both energy medicine and functional medicine very early in my holistic, path, um, what happened was my goal was to help people to integrate these tools in their lives so that they can actually get off their psychiatric medications and then hopefully not have to see me anymore and just be free to do their thing and maximize their creative potential. And with that goal in mind, I think it's been really, really fulfilling for me, along with, all of the other areas in my life that I felt has been evolving along with, that journey, that medical treatment paradigm shift for me is just part of my life. But, the other aspects that had been shifting along with that has been really fulfilling as well. So now it's been 20 years of holistic medicine and it's been really great because now my approach with an integration of psychiatry, functional medicine, and energy medicine has integrated into a very mature approach. And I'm starting to teach other clinicians what it is that I do to help them learn to also do what it is that I do. So,
thank you.
yeah.
And I already know, and you've told me that this happened because you yourself were prescribed Zoloft.
Mm-hmm.
And would you say that that experience is what triggered sort of your own healing and then your ability to heal others? Do you think you would have gone holistic had you not experienced Zoloft?
Well, I was put on Zoloft during the beginning of my junior year in my adult psychiatry residency, and uh, the training psychiatrist who was, meeting with me once a week at the time was using that to address my disappointment with psychiatry, actually, at that time.
So is it like an
Because,
authoritative move? Was this your superior was prescribing you medication?
yeah, he was a training psychiatrist, and I was
Mhm.
seeing him for both therapy as well as, understanding more about my own internal, I guess, having my own internal insights about my life so I can be a better psychiatrist. And as I was sharing with him, he was basically serving the role of a therapist for me. As I was telling him that I wanted to quit psychiatry and that life wasn't worth living as a psychiatrist because I didn't like psychiatry.
What
He
didn't you like at that time?
Well, I was, most of the training psychiatrists were spending all their time on the inpatient units with chronically mentally ill at the
Right.
VA hospitals. And I found it very depressing. And there was something about just the way there was such a hopelessness about it. And people weren't really getting better, obviously. And people were coming in and out of the hospitals. And a lot of it was insurance driven. So I saw patients leave that weren't ready to leave because the insurance wouldn't pay for
Oh.
their treatment. All of it kind of made me feel like I made the wrong choice in going into psychiatry. I wanted to go into psychiatry to really understand people and be able to help people and, to have a positive, fulfilling experience and not be, I guess, shocked by the reality of what psychiatry really was. And so when I was seriously looking into going back into my initial interest in literature and creative writing, I was interviewing, like chairman of the English department at Hopkins, who was very close to my training center, and asking about their program and talking with other people about shifting my career. He suggested I take Zoloft instead because he felt like I was depressed. I know it sounds a little bit weird right now, but I was very depressed.
No,
I did
I
not.
believe it. I just think it's like you either get into literature or take these drugs. Those two
Yeah.
at
And there was
odds.
a lot of, of course I didn't want to take Zoloft, but there was a lot of, comments from this clinician who up until then was taking a psychodynamic approach with our sessions where he literally just said, like maybe once or twice during the entire session and had no expressions on his face. But when it came to, me leaving psychiatry, he started speaking to me
Mm.
about how I should take this medication. So I did take the medication based upon his recommendation. And to my surprise, within about a week, a lot of the desire to quit psychiatry, the angst, the depression, it just kind of went away. And I just felt better and I was
Mm.
able to, just be okay with my lot in life.
Yeah, I'm so curious about how it feels
Uh-huh.
because like I've taken, so many Adderalls
Mhm.
and I know and I know Adderall was the original antidepressant, amphetamine was the first
Mhm.
antidepressant and it felt good. And
Okay.
you know what I mean? Like it
Uh-huh.
just fills you with happy hormones,
Mhm.
confidence. And I'm
Mhm.
very curious, because when you take like Adderall and you go to
Mhm.
college, people want some,
Mhm.
everybody, can I have one? It's desirable. But
Mhm.
I've never heard of anyone saying, can I have a Zoloft? It looks like fun. I'm really curious. How would you describe how it feels?
It didn't
Working.
feel anything. I just felt like within about a week, I noticed that I wasn't wanting to run and escape from psychiatry anymore. I was kind of like able to be more stress resilient, and I was able to take my situation, and it didn't bother me anymore.
So do you think so like biomechanically, I'm sure
Hmm.
you might be versed on that. Like how does
Hmm.
it do that? What's going on?
Um, Well, we know that the SSRIs allow the serotonin that you make in your body to work for a little bit longer before it gets recycled back into the original nerve cell that released it.
Mm.
So um, I think that since 95% of our serotonin receptors are in the gut brain connection is what's being facilitated. and probably at a nutritional level, the GI system is working better. So I had my GI system was working better. I was absorbing nutrients more easily. I was probably sleeping better. I just don't even remember. But um, at the time that I wanted to leave psychiatry, it was about a year after I gave birth to my daughter. And I was very sleep deprived because I
Mm.
was up at night with my daughter, for several months during that period of time. And there were, of course, still being on call where you're sleep deprived. So serotonin gets converted to melatonin in the brain. And so it allows sleep to happen much more easily. So between, maybe getting better sleep, having more nutrients being absorbed in my body, I think I just developed more stress resilience. So I didn't have the stress response at the level where, the adrenaline kicks in. And when adrenaline kicks in, it just gives you the message of the fight or flight. So for me, I responded to that message by trying to run away from psychiatry and go to a less stressful environment. And the main stress was obviously psychiatry. Obviously, being a young mom is also stressful, but you don't just, run away from that. So,
No.
anyways, yeah, so that I think that's what happened. But there's no like sudden shift with Zoloft. Although
Yeah.
I will tell you that within about 2 weeks, I felt better after a few days. And so within 2 weeks, I said, well, I've been feeling great for about 2 weeks. I think I'm healed from this problem, so I'm going to stop it. And at that time, I was on 25 milligrams of Zoloft, which is half of a usual typical starting dose. So it was a very low dose. And so I stopped it after 2 weeks. And I noticed that I was getting a very strange sensation in my head. So it wasn't like I was getting depressed or having immediate, like the return of the angst or anything. But I noticed that in my head, I was experiencing a zapping effect. It was as if I could hear my head go like
Like there
that.
was a loose wire in your brain or something?
Exactly,
Was it a
exactly.
auditory hallucination?
No, I think it really was like electrically that was something was short circuiting or something. And this
Mm.
is actually a very common withdrawal side effect from SSRIs. I was getting it within 2 weeks of taking that medication. And when I shared that observation with the training psychiatrist, he said, well, that doesn't sound good. You may need to go back on that medication. So he didn't recognize it as a withdrawal side effect. And he just recommended that I go back on the 25 milligrams. And I did. And they just kind of left me on that medication and never changed it. I was on 25 milligrams of Zoloft until 5 years later in 1996 is when I tried to get off of that medication. So within 2 weeks, I was having withdrawals. And at
Yeah.
5 years, when I tried to get off of the Zoloft, I thought, I've been well for the last 5 years. I think I should be able to stop it. It's half a starting dose. I'm going to just stop it. And so I did. And I had really horrible withdrawal side effects at that point.
What were those withdrawal side effects?
So I went on and off, and finally I discovered I realized they were withdrawal side effects. But the
Yeah, did
withdrawal
you
side
think it
effects
was like
were, yeah, I thought it
dermat?
was my depression. I thought it
Yeah, and
was
I had
like
the same
depression
thing with
coming
that.
back.
I'm like, is this my ADHD? It's like, no, it's an
Yeah.
amphetamine withdrawal, but they're kind of a blurred line here.
I think that with the SSRIs, the way I work as a holistic psychiatrist is I think of it as withdrawal side effects, but also I think that the unaddressed issues are still there. So
Yes.
whatever underlying causes that made me need the medication hasn't actually gone away
Mm.
in particular. Anyways, I think it's a combination of those two factors. But when I try to get off the Zoloft 25 milligrams, about 5 years into it, now this was after my second child was born. And during my second pregnancy, I was on Zoloft. I was on the 25 milligrams of Zoloft.
And that's safe?
I don't think it was my desire to be on it, but
Mm-hmm.
but the OBGYNs, they said it was fine. They didn't think there was any problems with it, but conventional
Yeah.
doctors are always very,
Encouraging of that. Yeah.
encouraging of people being on their meds. But anyways, when I try to get off after that, I did notice all sorts of issues. But the most blatant, obvious problem that I had was incredible crushing depression. Like this was unlike any kind of
Yeah,
depression I experienced when I got on the Zoloft. Yeah, it
what
was, to me, it was like a near death experience.
you know, and I
Yeah.
know. I mean, I think I had a similar
Uh-huh.
experience with Adderall, but I think with
Mhm.
Zoloft, from everything I've seen and read, it's worse. It's harder.
Yeah, I was angry, I was depressed, I didn't have energy, I was suicidal. Like I think the only thing that kept me from being suicidal was I was too caring about other people and how
Yeah,
other people would suffer, like if I were to kill myself. But literally, like I had
and you were a mom.
glimmer of joy in my body at all. And so
Mm.
and I did do my work as a psychiatrist. I was always able to put aside myself so I could like focus on other people and do my work. But I just I had no joy at all, and I had no capacity to feel any kind of happiness when I stopped it. And so I would get back on it. And when I finally realized, after maybe my third or fourth on off trial, when I realized that I had to do something to help myself get off this medication because my body and mind was physically dependent on it, I used ginkgo biloba and St. John's wort at that point as herbals, because I just Googled what are like holistic,
Yeah.
things to do at this point. So I put myself on ginkgo biloba and St. John's wort, and it really did help. I was able to get off the Zoloft, but um, I was only about 80% of my, usual happy self. So I was pretty kind of normal on the Zoloft, but off the Zoloft, I was about 80% of my kind of optimistic, stress resilient self, even with this ginkgo biloba and St. John's wort. But I just refused to get back on that Zoloft. I was like, never in a million years will I ever get back
Yeah.
on a drug that would cause that level of withdrawal for
Mm.
me. Yeah.
Totally relate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, congratulations.
Well,
It's rough.
then, yeah.
How long of a period was it with that painful, crushing depression sensation after getting off it?
Well, I was able to resolve it with a ginkgo biloba and St. John's wort. But, I would try to stick with it for, a few months, of
And then you
that
would get
depression. I would get back on it because it wasn't relenting. It wasn't getting better. And it was kind of like, I would just say that I experienced such intense, like emotional, I think even the aggression was so intense. That was really, really crazy thinking back on it. One time, I remember this was off the Zoloft. After a few weeks, I was so frustrated with life, and I had this, kind of intense, I guess, anger that wasn't me. And I remember I had to have a place where I could like let it out. So I was living in an apartment at the time, and my car was parked in the public parking space, it was out in the open. So I said, okay, I'm going to just let it out in the car. Right. So I had the windows rolled up, and I just yelled as loud as I could, like this
Wow.
really like swear word. Okay. Cause I never swear.
They have their
I was
place. Yeah.
just swore really loud. And
Yeah.
then I backed up, and I was turning around, and I saw two guys who had been on the sidewalk walking down the street, and my parking lot, was next to the sidewalk. And I had screamed so loud, they thought it was directed to them. One of the guys was holding one of the other guys back from trying to like accost me
Oh,
because
wow.
they thought that I was swearing at them. And I was like, I just drove by and just like really fast.
And I'm
I
sure
had
from
caused,
you, they were like, what is going on?
yeah, I know. Like she must be crazy. She just yelled and screamed this swear word, and I guess my windows didn't keep the sound down because they obviously heard it all the way to the sidewalk, and they thought
Yeah.
it was directed towards them.
Well, it's
And
better out than
yeah,
in with that, I suppose.
yeah. But I think for if it had happened to some young man or something, and who had a gun or something, then you have a really bad mix where you have
Sure.
someone who's really withdrawing from a drug, and then they
Yeah.
have some
Well, I mean,
guns available at home, and
with
they feel like,
Zoloft,
yeah, mhm,
there's a lot of stories like that.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah. I don't know.
The
Yeah.
Columbine shooter.
Uh-huh.
And I
Tell
mean,
me about that.
well, I know about it personally because when I was 14, my next door neighbor was an 11-year-old girl who was put on Zoloft and taken off of it after 2 weeks or a
Mm-hmm.
month or so, like you said. And
Mm-hmm.
she took her own life in the withdrawal promptly.
Oh,
And
wow.
this is an 11-year-old girl.
Wow.
And her parents directly correlated it to the medication, and to their psychiatrist told her to just stop
Yeah.
and not taper off.
Mm-hmm.
And they ended up as a family going to the Supreme Court, taking, devoting so much energy in her honor to preventing it from happening ever again to anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
And they did one time, I remember hanging out with some of the victims of the Columbine shooting because they were staying at their house and they were over and talking. And
Mm-hmm.
they were working with victims from the Columbine shooting because they associated that with the medication. Those kids were on Zoloft.
I see. I see. And were they on it when that happened, or were they taken off of it when it happened?
I'm not sure the specifics, but
Okay.
they were connecting it to it. And I think at that point, as a parent, they were probably just associating that medication with every bad thing in the world
Okay.
if it takes your child.
Yeah, I think that what I noticed was that someone like me whose whole life is devoted on serving others and helping other people, for me to get so angry on my withdrawals, during my withdrawals, told me that that level of rage that can happen is very dangerous in terms of, like in other people. Like I could have, like use that rage and turn it on myself, because I
Yeah.
did feel very, very suicidal.
Yeah.
And also that aggression where I just had to vent it out and scream.
Yeah, that's someone who's already at another level to the other.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
I mean, I know for me, when I was withdrawing on Adderall, like I would have a suicidal thought would be almost like an ad, in my brain, normal programming, and then it's like this horrible thought of treating yourself the worst way possible.
Mhm.
And I would say, "Oh yeah, I'm withdrawing on amphetamines. That's what that is."
Mm.
And I'm curious if you had a strategy to cope with those because it's like an invasion. That's how
Mm.
I looked at it, and I'm curious. I know these are different
Yeah.
drugs.
I was so brainwashed, I must say. It didn't occur to me that this drug had caused these symptoms when I stopped it until my last attempt to come off of it. I had, I would come off of it and then I would get back on it, and I'd come off of it and get back on it. And each of those times would be several months.
Yeah,
And I just never really, because I was brainwashed into thinking that these drugs are really helpful for me. And so I kept thinking this must be my depression. But when I would get back on it, it would just kind of miraculously vanish again, like pretty quickly. So it had a withdrawal kind of effect. The last time that happened to me and it went away, and I realized that some component of it was due to withdrawal, that's when my anger was directed towards the medication for the first time.
instead of yourself.
Because yes, up until then, I was a devotee of the drug approach because I was a psychiatrist who prescribed drugs. So I was brainwashed to thinking that what I was doing was the best intervention for my patients. And so when I realized that this withdrawal could be so severe, and it was withdrawal, or at least a big portion of it, then I got angry. Now, the reason why I got angry was because I felt like I had been an innocent victim of a process that I was not informed that this would happen, and I was like, how in the world could the medical profession prescribe something and not know about withdrawal side effects like this severe? And if I was just on 25 milligrams and this happened, imagine people who are on 50 or 100 or 150 or 200 for that matter.
It probably goes that high.
And I was the kind of person that at that point, and still to this day, I never smoked, I never drank coffee, never drank alcohol. I was the farthest person who would ever want to use any chemical to, like I would never want to be dependent on anything like a drug. So I said to myself, obviously, I'm not going back on this medication. I have to find some way out. Started taking the ginkgo biloba and St. John's wort, which helped. I would say it wasn't until 2002 when I started using nutritional supplements to help my patients who had bipolar disorder that I started taking a multivitamin as a regular kind of like thing to see if it would help my mental health. And the 80% went to 100% like pretty quickly. I was pretty nutritionally like deprived, I guess. And so I needed those vitamins for my own, mental health. And so the question was like, what shifted? I just, once I realized that it was withdrawal, I just shifted my whole like purpose as a psychiatrist. I wanted myself never to take that medication. I wanted to figure out a way to help my patients to be able to handle withdrawals. And obviously, during the whole process of being on the medication and experiencing withdrawal, I realized what it felt like to be the patient. And before then, I still felt like, I was doing everybody a favor when I put them on these medications.
Mm-hmm.
And then once I realized that these medications are hard to get off of, which it never occurred to me before. I thought, well, put them on the medication, and then eventually they just come off once they're well. But once I realized that that's not what happens with these medications, then and that nobody really knew about it, I had to do something about it. So at the time, of course, it was in 2000. So 1996 was when I got myself off slowly.
That's when I started taking amphetamines that year.
Oh yeah.
When I was 7, yeah.
Wow. And so once I get off around the 1990s, it was another like 5 years, if I remember right, before I learned about functional medicine, and then 6 years before I learned about energy medicine. But once I started learning more about functional medicine and energy medicine, then I had the tools to kind of like do something about it. But before then, even though I was off the medication, was still like using medication to help my patients and, maybe integrating a little bit of ginkgo biloba or St. John's wort, but I had no tools, no information to really do anything about my mind, my shift, the
Yeah.
shift in my desire to help other patients. So,
I might turn my light on really quick. 'Cause
okay.
it's
Okay.
much better.
Okay.
I think so.
Yeah.
So you were still prescribing medications, but you were starting to do like dabble in energy and functional medicine and herbs. And what I think was really interesting is when you were talking about the Zoloft, you were saying that part of its function, which I never heard, was the healing the gut.
Yeah, because
So,
the serotonin system is mostly found in the gut.
so when someone takes Zoloft, it's actually good for digestion? Is that
Yeah. And when you withdraw from it, it's horrible for digestion and absorption.
really? So
Yeah.
you like,
Or at least my energy testing indicates that.
okay. Because then and then so that would make someone maybe infer that to cure depression, you take some probiotics, or like that is depression a gut problem?
Well, nowadays the probiotic area has really made advances, and there's a lot of new probiotics now that are supposed to help with depression.
So if you're feeling sad, like eat a pickle.
I don't know
Sorry,
if a
I don't
pickle
mean
has the right. Yeah,
reduce it to
I
that
don't know if
level.
it will have the right probiotics, but yeah, there are probiotics that are supposed to really help with depression and also help with the mind gut kind of like communication and things like that. So I do use those probiotics for my patients, and
And in your
I
situation
think it's
too,
helpful.
that's the thing I always think about too with depression as a diagnosis is like it's either you change your internal chemistry or you change your exterior environment, which seemed like you were in a place you didn't want to be in. So the option was change that place or change yourself.
Yeah, I don't know if in the divine scheme of things whether it was a good thing for me to leave psychiatry, even
No,
though it would
it's
have
not
been a
because
lot easier. You know what I mean?
well,
Like I
you're the
still,
wounded healer at that point in the archetypical maybe
yeah,
because
I
you've
will
been
say
there.
that at this point, and when I started in medicine, well, what's it? 1989 was when I went into adult psychiatry. So it's been a lot of years since, I've gone into medicine. I would say at this point in 2023, soon to be 2024, I am very fulfilled in terms of my profession. I'm still working on that part of me that has always wanted to be more of a writer, artist person. But I would say that I'm okay with the fact that I'm in medicine.
Yeah.
It's not like for a long time though. I felt like medicine wasn't a good fit for me. And no matter how good I was at doing whatever it was I ended up doing with my patients, um, I felt like it was more for them, but it wasn't for me. But now I see that overall, it's going to come full circle where the healer who is hoping to heal other people will eventually heal themselves.
Wow.
Yeah. Thank you.
It all comes full circle.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you just one more question about Zoloft. I'm curious, even though we're
Hmm.
circling back, just because I have like made up thoughts about it, and I don't know how accurate they are. So I wanted
Okay.
fact checked my thoughts, talking to people and who have experienced it, because I'm just fascinated with medication
Mm-hmm.
and the interaction medications have with minds, not just
Mm-hmm.
bodies. And but that antidepressants, someone has said like here would be on one end of a spectrum extreme sadness, and here is extreme happiness, and somebody might be experiencing that extreme sadness, so it narrows the spectrum entirely. So while protecting you from that extreme sadness, does it also prevent you from true joy? Does it dull the emotional sword, is my question.
I think that a lot of people would say yes to that. Because I was on a very low dose of Zoloft, I did not notice that it dulled my sense of happiness. But I think that I wasn't quite so insightful at the time. I wasn't really paying attention, really. But I do think that a lot of the medications that we, as psychiatrists, use are dulling medications. They're tranquilizers, they're numbers. They help people to not think about the painful issues at hand, and it buys them some time to like find some other interventions, like a holistic intervention that might do the underlying healing so that they can
Mm.
overcome whatever it is that is extraordinarily painful for them that they can't handle.
Is that their purpose in society, or?
Yeah, but I think in general, though, it's ironic. I was thinking that psychiatrists who are in this profession to help people gain insight and help them to really be more alive with their emotions are stuck with medications that actually numb people to their emotions. Like
Mm.
we're kind of like psychiatrists now are kind of like relegated to a corner of psychopharmacology where they're using tools that basically numb people from their feelings. That's what a lot of patients tell me, because I'm able to help them get off their medications. They will say after their healing journey that they're so happy that they can laugh and cry and react with their proper emotions on board. Whereas before, they sure the medications were helpful in terms of mitigating their pain, but it also made it so that they couldn't cry at the movies.
Yeah.
They just couldn't have any normal reaction. They couldn't be really happy because then the medication put a ceiling on that. So absolutely. It just limits your ability to, really experience the fullness of what it means to be human.
Right. And I mean, that's what you were saying reminds me of a rumor that I was making up that I think is accurate, because I get
Mm-hmm.
in arguments on the internet with people when they see what I've done, and something people will say is these medications saved my life. And then I think about being on a ship, and that
Mm-hmm.
if you fall off the ship, the lifesaver, you get thrown out the raft, and then it saves your life. But then
Mm-hmm.
when you get back, you get out. You get back on the shore, and that's the way I think. It's like I think they are life-saving in that capability, where if you're risk at drowning, they can save you. But the thing I'm unsure about is long term, and
Yeah.
that none of these psychiatrists ever present a real exit plan. They just say, just take
No.
this, come back every 2 months, we'll take your blood pressure for eternity.
Yeah. And I think that we have to take into account the financial aspects of how medicine is built. So there's really no financial incentive,
In healthy people.
in in people who don't need to buy your medication, right? So
Yeah.
these pharmaceutical companies spend millions and millions of dollars to do the research to create the medication, but they're not going to spend millions and millions and millions of dollars to do research to know how to help you get off their medication, because they want you to keep, investing in their product. But I will say a very general comment that I'm sure pharmaceutical companies won't like, and maybe a lot of people who are happy with their meds won't like. And that is, every medication has been patented so that the pharmaceutical company can sell it as a unique molecule. Because they are patented and they are unique molecules, they're not recognized by our bodies as natural substances. They're not like food. So our bodies will react to these medications as a xenobiotic, a foreign substance. And the natural reaction to a xenobiotic is that it stimulates the immune system to create an inflammatory reaction against it, any medication. And that inflammatory reaction will become stronger and stronger over time. And since the underlying causes for mental health oftentimes is inflammation and oxidative stress caused by the inflammation. So ultimately, all of these medications have kind of like a ticking clock to them, so that at some point, the inflammation caused by these foreign substances that the person takes every day will be so high that the benefits will be less than the inflammatory reaction it creates. And so at that point, the person will say, the medication has stopped working for me.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not because the chemical process has changed in any way. It's because their body no longer can tolerate that medication.
Wow.
Because it's creating an immune reaction to it, an inflammatory reaction, just like you would do to any foreign substance that you introduce to your body every day that is foreign. Like if you were to eat a certain amount of dust every day, at some point your body's going to
Yeah,
have a
but
hypersensitive
with
reaction to
something
dust.
that is what you're saying, that's something that comes from the earth, for example, like coffee, that won't
Mm-hmm.
happen because coffee is a plant? Or is that still, does my body receive the caffeine molecule and also create an inflammation response?
There's a way in which the body addresses the foods that we take or herbs that we take. It has to digest it. It has to metabolize it. So I can't speak specifically about coffee, but I do know that even foods that you eat, if you don't digest it properly and metabolize it properly, and it crosses the lining of the gut, in which it's still kind of seen as a foreign
Undigested?
substance.
Yeah.
Yeah, like partially digested. The immune system will become hypersensitized to that as well. So
Okay.
yes, I think you can get hypersensitized to something you take every day, even if it's a plant. If it crosses the blood, if it crosses the gut, partially metabolized and digested, the immune system will think of it as a foreign substance, develop an immune reaction. And that's how people with, quote, leaky gut syndrome develop food sensitivities, because about 80% of our immune system actually lines the gut.
That's a lot of
So,
it.
yeah, that's a lot of it. Yeah.
Wow. I'd like to learn more about that. Another thing
Yeah.
that you were talking, and this is random, but I'm wondering if it was an inflammation response or something like that, that when I took the
Mhm.
medication, from being a teenager onward,
Mhm.
I had really bad body odor, and I did not, and my sweat would actually stain my shirts.
Mm-hmm.
And that didn't happen, where I had yellow pit stains. And is that my body fighting, pushing it out? I mean, that's the
And then
theory.
after you stopped it, you didn't have it anymore?
No, and I still sweat, but I wouldn't have like that rust color on my shirt. And it might have been some food I was eating at the time or something, but
Interesting. Now that I think about it, that happened to me too
really,
on Zoloft. Yeah.
you had,
I definitely had darker stains under my armpits. Yeah, on my shirts. Yeah, it
that's
doesn't
weird.
happen now anymore. I think
Yeah.
the skin is like one of the top or the second to the top detox organs. It's one of the largest organs in the body, and its purpose, part of the main purpose, is detoxification. So if it's coming, if it's usually coming out through your sweat, some way of detoxification. So I'm pretty sure that part of the detoxification process with these chemicals are being handled by the skin.
That's pretty interesting.
Yeah, good
And
observation, though.
yeah. And I think it's interesting too,
Mhm.
just like back to the prescription of these medications, that when
Mhm.
I was withdrawing, I wanted to get back on, and I went to a psychiatrist, and she talked to me for 15 minutes,
Mhm.
and she remarked that I'd been cutting myself. And the truth was I had just adopted a kitten, and the
Oh,
cat had scratched me up. And I
okay.
said, "Oh no, I'm not doing that. That's a cat."
Mhm.
And she said, "Uh-huh." And I said, "No, really." And I pulled out my phone. I showed her pictures of the brand new kitten. I said, "I don't hurt myself.
Mhm.
And she gave me a prescription for Wellbutrin.
Okay.
And I remember saying, "Hey, that's an antidepressant, and I'm not struggling with depression. I have
Mhm.
been attentive and focused.
Mhm.
And she said to me, just try it for 2 weeks.
Okay.
And that reminds me of what you're saying, that like you already, after 2 weeks, you're kind of in tune with it.
Yeah, your body adjusts to it. Yeah.
And I wonder, had I not been like vigilantly against antidepressants,
Mhm.
if I had taken it after 2 weeks, she said you'll feel better.
Mhm.
And do you think sometimes these medications are given to people just to like you said, tranquilize? You know, because I came in for AD, she wanted to give me that. Would that have helped?
Well, I know that in terms of training, that is taught to psychiatrists that Wellbutrin can have a stimulatory effect,
Mm.
like a stimulant, and some people will try that instead of the stimulant. There may be differences. Obviously, there are big differences actually between Wellbutrin's receptor profile versus, Adderall, for example. But um, I think that in terms of clinical training, though, she would have heard that in her clinical training that the two somehow can do similar things. Um, I think what you experienced in the office, though, is part of the problem with psychiatry in general is that there's really nothing that, other than what they get from their clinical training and lectures, there's really no guiding principle as to what drug is the best one for the person. So a psychiatrist can prescribe Wellbutrin if she or he feels like it at the moment.
That's what it kind of seems like, where
Yeah,
they have their favorites.
yeah, yeah.
And it's thing about it is that it seems to be so much intuitive, which is dangerous in a way, that just giving these
Yeah.
people these powerful medications on a whim. And I don't know if you ever looked at like what is his name, David Amen, who does brain scans, or is it
Yeah,
Stephen
Dr.
Amen? Dan
It's
Daniel
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 Amen.
Amen.
Yeah.
And he
Yeah, he
tries to
does
say
that.
that
Yeah.
that's a physiological evidence of the medications and their benefit.
Yeah, he does prescribe still medications. And then he prescribes some supplements. But yeah, I think that with regard to the approach that psychiatrists give, because the field of psychiatry depends mostly on the psych history. So if you depend on psych history for most of the data, then it's a symptom-driven field, meaning it's whatever the symptoms show up. And if it's based upon symptoms, then you really don't know what the underlying causes are. There could be lots of different underlying causes for one symptom, and there could be the same underlying causes for multiple symptoms. So it's not clear what those underlying causes are. If you don't know what the underlying causes are, then there's no reason to expect the doctor to have a way to tell which medication is a good fit for one patient versus another, because they don't know what the underlying causes are for one person's depression versus another person's
Right.
depression.
Because one could
Okay.
be a dormant trauma and the other could
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
a gluten intolerance. Like
Yes.
that.
Yeah, exactly. And people get, antipsychotic medications if they have a problems with sleep, for example. They don't have to be psychotic. They
Mhm.
just have to have, problems with sleep, and they might get an antipsychotic medication just to
Right.
help them sleep at night.
And I'm gonna guess that withdrawing from that medication causes psychosis. A wild guess. I don't know.
Yeah, they're going to be more vulnerable. Let's just say they may have a different biology, but they're they're going to have problems with insomnia when they try to come off that medication,
Right.
because there's really no actual healing. It's just the body's dependency on something that changes the messenger system of the body.
Does it? Someone I know, another holistic psychiatrist out there had mentioned that the chemical imbalances are caused by medications. Is that accurate?
Um, Chemical imbalances are caused. Well,
That the
one of the
medications
things.
themselves imbalance you.
Yeah, I think that you can summarize it like that. I would just say that one thing, for example, that is out there in terms of information about SSRIs is that within a couple of weeks, your serotonin storage levels are depleted, severely depleted by the medication. So if you
But
don't
isn't it
have
supposed to conserve it by taking it at a regulated rate?
what it does is it slows down the reuptake of serotonin. So it allows serotonin to bind to the nerve cell that is opposing the nerve cell that released it. So there's a nerve cell that releases it, the serotonin binds to the other nerve cell, and then it goes back to the original nerve cell and gets recycled back with the reuptake pumps. That process of recycling back is slowed down. And so the serotonin is left between the two nerve cells in the what we call the synaptic cleft for a little longer. And that allows the serotonin to bind to the receptor a little bit more, like gives them more time to bind. But in that synaptic cleft, the serotonin neurotransmitter is faced with a lot of digestive enzymes. Let's not digestive enzymes like in the gut, but like enzymes that will clean up that space, of debris. And so with that, that's actually one of the reasons why the breakdown of serotonin will accelerate. And you're going to have less serotonin going back into the original cell. And so after a while, the body can't keep up with the need for creating serotonin. So the storage levels go down.
And that causes
Depression. Yeah.
So the medication causes depression?
Yes, more depression. Like the kind of depression I experienced after 5 years on serotonin or the SSRIs was, I would say, like 50 times worse than any kind of depression I had when I was put on it. So
yeah, it sounds like you were frustrated. And
I was frustrated and I was saying words that maybe made the psychiatrist very anxious. Like I was saying, I feel suicidal all the time. I don't think life is worth living. I don't want to be here anymore. I wasn't going to act on it, but I really did feel like life was nightmarish. The kind of life that a psychiatry resident was expected to just do was really like a nightmare. I mean, if you
yeah,
can imagine having to spend all your days in and out for like almost 3 years on an inpatient psych hospital in the VA hospital, like day in and day out, it's not fun.
yeah, and I mean, you're talking about now you're energetic wise, you're having all this trauma of war. You're at the VA, right? So these are veterans.
Yeah, a
And
lot of them
that's
were
you're receiving
veterans.
a lot of really painful, heavy emotions and trying to manage them for other people.
Yeah, and I think that there was that time also, remember when I got myself off the Zoloft, but for a few years I hadn't learned about functional medicine yet, right? So I was still prescribing medications, and I do remember at that time, even though the medications were working well for my patients and they were getting better and stuff, that I didn't want to be in psychiatry at that time either. In fact, I remember being very envious of the grocery baggers. Like every time I go to the grocery store and buy groceries and I see the grocery baggers, I was like, man, I wish I would just like, I'd rather bag groceries than be a psychiatrist because I really hated what I was doing. And
Oh,
I shouldn't have because my patients were getting better and I was making a lot of money and I was doing what I was taught was supposed to be done. But I guess the desire to be a psychiatrist and stay in psychiatry was a fake medication effect by Zoloft because as soon as I got off the Zoloft, it came back again. I still didn't want to be in psychiatry.
right. Like you said, the issue that causes the initial thing is still there.
Yeah, exactly. So when I got into functional medicine, and I, became a holistic psychiatrist, yes, I was still a psychiatrist, but I was doing just the opposite of what psychiatrists did. And it allowed me to actually enjoy what I did. So it
Mm.
made psychiatry uh, much more rewarding and fun and fulfilling for me, even though I was working with some of the toughest patients. But
Yeah, but now your
mhm,
mission is to get people off medication. Would you
mhm,
say that's the lion's share of your work is
yeah,
people who are like, I'm on a medication, I'm ready to quit, and they come to
right,
you?
right.
Or
And like right now, I'm in a conversation with a young man who wants to treat his OCD without medication. So, that's even faster. Like I can help him heal faster if he doesn't start on medication. Like if I
Oh, so
just,
yeah,
yeah.
get to the issue before the
Hmm.
secondary issue of withdrawal and stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't have to deal with withdrawals and stuff like that. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's great
So,
that people
hmm
are already akin to being like, I know there's a problem. And that's something I think about too. It's like sometimes like, is ADD? It's like, yeah, no, it is a thing. But there's other solutions. There can't be this only solution. And I'm curious if you in your practice, are there times where you think medication is the way, or is it always kind of a step backwards?
I think, I do use antipsychotics if someone is really flagrantly psychotic and a danger to themselves and others. Um, but it's there as a temporary band-aid as I continue to help them, heal the underlying causes. But I guess one of the important things that people need to understand is how quickly the holistic interventions can work. There was this one particular young girl. She was like 12 or 13 at the time. And she had 2 years of depression. She was suicidal. She wasn't doing well in school. She thought everybody hated her. We put her on some natural supplements. We didn't even work on the serotonin system per se. Like I didn't give her any specific nutritional supplement that increased her serotonin levels. We just increased her vitamins and minerals and, essential fatty acids. And within a week, she was so much better. So I think I dragged out her treatment to like 4 sessions. And
Mm.
2 of those 4 sessions towards the end, she was perfectly doing great. And I knew another really wonderful young man who came in and he didn't want to take antipsychotics, but he was definitely kind of like having those, psychotic symptoms. He wasn't, I don't remember exactly. It was very early in my holistic journey, but he was having, I think, some delusions. He had tried to jump off a cliff, but he didn't hurt himself. He kind of scratched his cheek a little bit.
Hmm.
But he didn't want to be on a antipsychotic. So we put him on, at the time, I just put him on some supplements. And again, within a week or two, he was like doing so much better. He felt like he said he was back to himself again. So things that you would think might take a long time actually don't take a long time. You know what does take a long time is withdrawals. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, this is the thing. When people take a medication and then they withdraw from that medication, the withdrawal side effects is a very specific fingerprint of that medication, because that medication affects very specific receptors and neurotransmitters. And so the person, if they were to stop that medication, then those very, very specific receptors and neurotransmitters are affected. So you can't just throw like a greens formula and a mineral supplement or vitamins at the person. You have to actually work with those specific receptors and be able to make a change in those so that the person can, start to feel normal again.
Oh
That's,
yeah.
yeah, that's very, very difficult compared to someone who comes in with the same symptoms. They can be depressed, they can even be psychotic, but you can use like general supplements and they will get better because they're not having those symptoms due to a very specific profile caused by a medication
Yeah.
withdrawal.
I think
Yeah.
the Adderall withdrawal was like bulletproof, and the only thing I could do for it was time.
Really? I will
Yeah, I mean,
tell you.
I went and I got ginkgo biloba, gotu kola. I Googled everything and went to Whole Foods and bought every supplement. And I
Uh-huh.
was like, nothing could bring me back to that level. And
Okay, the
nothing ever
secret,
will.
the secret to those types of medications I did discover after I treated you. Okay.
What is it? I'm so curious.
You're right. There's certain medications that are different. Like, for example, with SSRIs, you can actually take certain supplements to build serotonin, but there are certain medications like stimulants, antipsychotics, those kind of medications where you have to use energy medicine.
Yeah, well, when I saw you, I had already been like 9 months.
Yeah.
So I was
Well,
kind of like,
the
I'm not struggling anymore, but I would love some tools.
Yeah, well, the energy medicine that I started using was specific for medication withdrawal.
Mm.
It was specific for creating a lower dependency on the medication. Because what I figured out after I worked with you was that there were certain medications where the only intervention that could really help with the withdrawal is the proper and appropriate and timely reduction of certain receptors on the cell membrane.
So what does that look like in application?
you'd have to use energy medicine to tell your body to reduce those receptors before you lower the medication.
So you're talking the almighty power of intention.
Yes.
Yeah.
And energy medicine. So what I started doing was we would set intentions and we would do the energy work and we'd say, we're going to lower the medication by this amount by this date. And the body would, shift the receptors. But there's also the supplements that are there to actually help with the raw materials to do whatever it is that we set those intentions for. So it's actually a combination of lowering the receptors, using the supplements to help with whatever the body needs to do. And then when the person comes back the following week, I would actually use the energy testing to see if we actually met our goals. Had the receptors lowered in terms of their number, and how well have the supplements helped that person to meet those healing goals. And with that, I was able to really mitigate the horrible, difficult circumstances associated with things like antipsychotic withdrawal, stimulants, benzodiazepines. Those are the
Yeah, those
medications
are
that,
the hardest, are the benzos.
yeah, it's because the energy medicine is key to that.
And I'm curious what you say, because, I believe in that, and I
Mhm.
accept the power of intention and I allow
Mhm.
it to happen, and I think that's how it works. But
Mhm.
I'm curious, I know a lot of people who are, fact-based, or
Mhm.
that's what they would say,
Mhm.
friends of mine and things like that, when I bring up this kind of thing and they think it's total BS. I'm curious, what's your explanation of explaining it to those kinds of people who very much sort of worship logic, reason, and think that there's no play. Like, how do you, when people
Well,
are
I tend
met
to
with,
go, I can
and
see, yeah,
a lot of
I
people are
understand.
don't they
Yeah.
like they'll follow you, and then as soon as you say something like that, they're off.
Okay. Yeah, I totally understand that. But
It's not me.
here's the thing. I think that intention is not something that you could just use and it will suddenly help people with medication withdrawal. Intention, if you want to use it as a doctor like me uses it, you have to kind of know a lot more about it as a tool. And so I can see both sides. Like if someone who really doesn't know how to use intention specifically for medication withdrawal were to try to do it, they would fall flat on their faces and it wouldn't work. So, as I'm thinking about how I work with intention, how I integrate everything together to help people get off medications, it's a lot more complicated than just setting an intention because intention is like paint, you can be creative with it, but there's also rules and there's a physics and math behind how you can create something. And that preciseness is also important as part of the healing process. So when I do when I integrate energy medicine and functional medicine and the energy testing and everything, there's a way for me to test to see, did the intention work or did we fall short of that intention? So that we're never just setting an intention, assuming that it's done what we asked it to do, and then we lower the medication without any data that said that would indicate that we've been able to achieve that goal. So intention can be measured almost in some ways in energy medicine. So you can set the intention, you can have the functional supports, you can measure it a week later and say, okay, let's say we set the intention to lower Haldol, an antipsychotic medication, by 1 milligram. Let's see with the testing where the person needs to be today, like this week. They may not be able to lower it by 1 milligram. They might be able to lower it by 0.5 milligram. And that's good. You use the intention to the best that you can, use the supplements the best that you can, but there's a way to test and make sure that you're not just jumping ahead with a medication lowering if you haven't met the goals. So there's a lot of different things that we have to interweave together so that even if you use all the tools, you don't just assume that an intention has done the job.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I mean, I'm interested in it and I believe and I know it works, but
Mm-hmm.
I know a lot of people who they they're not ready to go anywhere unless it's complete science, or journaled
Yeah.
medicine, I guess is what I mean. That's sort of
Yeah.
the
Yeah. I think that just like, just like I would say to most conventional psychiatrists, like if they don't know how to use the tools, then their reality is true. Like, for example, for conventional psychiatrists, if they just lower people's medication slowly based upon guesswork without any kind of support, either functionally or through energy medicine, and they tell the patients, this is not safe, you're going to have withdrawal side effects and you're going to get sick again, I would say they're absolutely right, because based upon their paradigm, the way the tools that they have, the way they work, I would never recommend anybody to come off medications under a conventional psychiatrist's direction. I don't think it's possible for them to really be successful most of the time.
So I mean, we that's like there's millions of people though. And imagine if all these people wanted to get off their medications, would they have to find practitioners like yourself and
I don't know, but I don't
yeah.
think the conventional psychiatrist, if a patient was successful, I would say that it's probably because their body has some plasticity and flexibility and did most of the work. But the
Mm,
psychiatrists, you know, basically, I think that the regular conventional psychiatrists just don't have the understanding that they need to be able to
yeah,
have
they're not
that
going to be
kind
able
of
to support
success.
that because I
Mm-hmm.
feel like a lot of times it's like this is a bad idea. I
Yeah.
don't know about this, and that's the
Yeah.
intention they're throwing in the situation.
And half the time, they don't even know that it's the withdrawals, because the withdrawals a lot of times happen about 3 months after the person has come off the medication
Oh,
already.
really?
So a lot of psychiatrists will say, well, the medication's out of your body now. It's been gone from your body for 2 or 3 months, so therefore it can't be due to the withdrawals from the medication, because the medication's not there, which makes absolutely no sense. But they think that the medication withdrawal can only happen while the medication is slowly coming down on your body, not 2 or 3 months later. It's kind of like saying, well, we injected the bacteria into your thigh last week. We didn't make any new injections, so that infection couldn't be caused by
Mm-hmm.
the bacteria because we injected it last week and the infection happened 2 months later?
Right. It kind of lays in
So,
wait.
yeah.
Yeah, and I see that a lot. I mean, because people talk to me about withdrawing from Adderall and all that, and it's like a flat line for a long time. They're saying it's been 8 months and I don't feel any better. And and I know in that mode, that the one thing that's going to make it stop is a return to the drug,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it'll stop it
I
indefinitely.
think that every drug has its own very scientific, physically precise way in which the withdrawal has to be handled. And I think even though I've been doing this for 20 years, I still know that there's a lot for me to learn in terms of all of these different types of medications and how to help people get off of them.
Yeah, and I
But
think
yeah,
in terms
go
of
ahead.
energy too, they have it. I know with mine, I almost at times anthropomorphized it into a being
Mhm.
and felt like I had to talk to it and stuff like that, which
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways to address it, but I always think of the stimulants as kind of like whipping a tired horse. So
mhm.
it's whipping the adrenals to work harder, even though um, I think a lot of times attention and focus is a reflection of the stress within the body of, multiple underlying causes. And then the adrenals get really tired. And if the adrenals are tired and it causes attention problems, imagine how tired the adrenals are after, 10 years of taking stimulants. It's like exhausted. And so how do
Yeah.
you help the adrenals to, heal?
Yeah, and I felt like I had to catch up on a lot of eating and sleeping that I was skipping and
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
But let me see. Yeah, so I mean, in terms of thinking back on Zoloft, do you
Mhm.
think that the experience taught would you say that I think I may, but you would have gone holistic without this intervention?
If I hadn't taken the Zoloft, I wouldn't be a psychiatrist today. I would
Hmm.
be writer. I would
And I did
be,
another
doing
question.
something else. Yeah.
You were studying literature?
Well, what happened was, I wanted to be a writer and I got into UC Berkeley, from high school because of my writing. And then, my parents, didn't, support me going there. So I ended up staying at home, going to the University of Utah. And I was really, my parents had told me that I couldn't be successful basically unless I were to go to a really elite college. So when they basically had me go to the University of Utah, I decided to abandon my writing to and just do something else. And so I chose medicine at the time because I wanted to be a psychiatrist, and then have some interesting experiences as a psychiatrist and then go back to my writing. That was my plan at the age of 17.
Okay, my
So,
question, because the past year or so, I've really become immersed in classic literature.
okay.
I'm just curious if you have a favorite piece of classic literature.
Favorite piece of classic literature. If I did like those pieces of literature, I feel like I haven't gone back enough to really say if I would like them now.
Hmm.
Um, but I do remember how I enjoyed two writers when I was back when I was really into literature a lot. And one was Mark Twain, and the other one was Dostoevsky. So I especially liked the book called Notes from the Underground.
Oh yeah, The Underground Man.
Yeah.
I haven't read it.
And there were some pieces by Mark Twain I remember on religion that was very funny that I thought was really, really kind of tongue in cheek that I really liked. But yeah, that would be it. Right now, I'm exploring like writings by Joseph Campbell.
Read that name.
He Joseph Campbell has a lot of like he wrote I think one of his books that really became famous was A Hero with a Thousand Faces. The Hero with a Thousand Faces. But the work that I'm reading right now is called Reflections on Life, and it's all about some of the things that Joseph Campbell taught at some seminars to people. Um, And one of the famous quotes that came from those lectures is this one quote that says, "The privilege of a lifetime is to be yourself. The
Yeah.
privilege of a lifetime is to be yourself." And I see that quote everywhere. Like a lot of people use that quote, and I find that he has a lot of these, quotable statements that kind of, inspire me. So lately I've been kind of going through his reflections on life and kind of trying to absorb it as part of my actually way of living as opposed to just intellectual, fodder.
Yeah, and I think that's a lot of when it comes to wisdom,
Mhm.
that it's really easy to come by something, but integration
Mhm.
is to actually consume it and apply it is a whole different task.
Yeah. He said something else that was really interesting in that book, and that was he said that it's important for us to let go of what the life that we think we should live and live the life that we have, which is something that had been my problem with regard to, thinking that I had left my life behind when I decided to go into medicine instead of following my aspirations to be a writer. For a long time, I thought, oh, I took the wrong path, and now I'm a doctor, and I'm not happy with it. But with Joseph Campbell, I think he says the truth that we have to let go of this idea of the kind of life that we were supposed to have, and then just embrace the life that we have now. And when we do that, I think he says we're saying really like yes to life. We're allowing ourselves to go with the flow, to truly be alive. And he says the whole purpose of life is to experience it, whatever comes. And
Yeah.
he encourages us to experience life and really relish it, whether it's the sad parts or the happy parts, you
Yeah,
know?
it's all a blessing.
Yes,
And
exactly.
what you're saying really reminds me of when I was withdrawing, like almost when I was through the depression part, then was the anger. It's almost like the stages of grief. And I was like,
Mm,
this is a huge derailment on my life. Because
yeah.
it's like now I've spent years not as myself, behaving
Mhm.
in ways that I don't actually behave in, doing things I don't want to do, developing a career that I don't want to have, and all of this stuff. But then turning that around and, okay, I'll devote my life to talking about Adderall. I don't, and
Well, it will be that for now. And then
yeah.
things will evolve and shift and change in ways you don't anticipate.
Yeah. Well, it
Mm.
made me a decent writer. I wouldn't have really, I wasn't interested in writing. And but I wanted to talk about Adderall. So I
Mm-hmm.
figured out that craft, and now it's like, okay, well, I really actually just enjoy using words. Where else?
Well, when I was 10 years old or 11 or 12, I don't even remember, I read the book, The World's Greatest Salesman by Og Mandino. And it was very inspiring for me at the time. And I remember kind of like, oh, I want to be a writer and I want to feel this, I want to create this feeling that I'm having. This feels so good to be so inspired and like, feel like you're just filled with light and everything. So that was why I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to create that kind of feeling in everybody else too. And I was thinking, as a 10 or 12-year-old, you have nothing to write about. There's nothing that you need to, there's nothing you can say that could really inspire other people like that. You have to
Hmm.
go out and live your life.
Oh yeah.
And I think that I took writing and I ran with it and I thought, oh, it's a craft, but it's really about the message, really. And I think that from a mystical, divine, spiritual perspective, I have been following my writer heart, and I have been living life, and I've been experiencing life in a way that is very privileged because I get to hear everybody's deepest, darkest secrets, right?
Yeah, you have some of the most fascinating literature before you
Uh,
every day almost in these
yes,
conflicts,
yes.
and you get to
Hmm.
play the role in those stories of
Yeah. And
fixer.
so, yeah, so now I have something that I can say. And when you have something that you want to say, then it's okay to write. But you can't
Yeah.
just say, oh, I'm going to be a great writer. I'm going to write. But then your life is so empty of
Yeah.
experiences, you know?
And we look
So,
at those great writers and their lives. We want to know what kind
mm,
of life led to that being what comes out of it. And there's always
mm,
something there.
yeah,
None
yeah.
of them, people who I think read a lot, go to school for writing, and then get out of school for writing, they probably don't write the most interesting things other than literary criticisms. I think
Mm,
all the best writers have been through it. At least, I mean, I just finished reading Moby Dick, and Herman
mm-hmm.
Melville was on a whaling ship, so
Oh,
he
mm-hmm.
had to go there. And also, I even think as a reader, because they had us read the Odyssey in high school, and it was totally kind of boring.
Mm-hmm.
And I read it this past year, and it's like after going through so many trials, I was like, yeah, I get it now.
Yeah.
And
When you said Moby Dick, that was funny. I was thinking of that too, because I remember we were divided into different reading groups, and I was in seventh grade, and they wanted us to read Moby Dick in
you're
our
reading
group.
Moby Dick in seventh grade?
Exactly. They were having me read Moby Dick in seventh grade, and I thought it was so boring.
It is boring. I
I
mean,
was
it's
like, what is this?
well, all the
Chasing a
whale,
whale.
well, the whale information chapters, and I know that they were put in there
Uh-huh.
to understand that most of the time these guys were sitting on a boat waiting. But even still, I feel like a seventh grader is not going to understand monomaniacal obsession.
No, no. I think they think because we were fast readers that we were ready for the material.
Hmm.
Another thing that was really interesting was believe it or not, my father recommended me to read. Okay, I kid you not. He said, "Well, you're a good reader. Read this book." Okay. He recommended that I read Gone with the Wind when I was in fourth grade.
So young. Do you remember
Would I?
reading it?
I did. I read it, but I returned it to the library halfway through and then I checked it out again. I finished it. But I was so mad at Scarlett because I thought, Scarlett is such a mean girl. I can't believe she does all these things. I was in
You,
fourth grade. I'm like,
you
9 years
didn't.
old. I did not understand a single thing about all of that. But you can read the words, but you don't understand life.
Have
You
you
know.
read? Just one more. Have
Mhm.
you read Don Quixote?
No, I haven't.
Okay, I
Yeah,
won
tell
this
me.
past.
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
loved it. I thought it
You
was
loved
great.
it? Okay.
Yeah,
What did you like about it?
I liked that Don Quixote is a character is just so interesting, and I personally identified with him because he believes in I'm sorry, he
Hmm.
believes in himself so much, and no one else like does, and he's
Hmm.
goes on these adventures, and he's foolish but noble, and that
Hmm.
just makes for such a great character as someone who
No.
keeps trying
Hmm.
despite getting battered by the world,
No.
and who's well read but acts poorly. It
Oh.
reminded me a lot of my missteps. I identified with it, but because
Hmm.
he's you'd have to read it. I don't know, but it's very good. And knowing that too, Cervantes had written 30 plays, and none of them went to stage. And his life was, he himself had been trying and trying and trying to no avail, but he wrote this masterful piece that's considered the first novel ever.
Well, talking about books does remind me of one of my favorite books. And you did ask about one of my favorite books. Yeah, it's a very thin book. It's actually Jonathan Livingston Seagull. Have you
I'll write
ever
it
read
down.
Jonathan Livingston Seagull? Jonathan Livingston Seagull was a thin book, and it's an allegory of life, and it's about the seagull who wanted to be, wanted to fly in a way that was well beyond the skills of most seagulls. And he was ostracized because he wanted to practice his flight experience. And was kind of kicked out of the seagull group. And in time, because he worked so hard at flying, he was able to get like really amazing like delicacies from the ocean because he knew how to dive into the water and stuff like that. And yeah, you just have to kind of read about it. And I feel like sometimes that I could relate to Jonathan Livingston Seagull because the things that I do makes me feel estranged. I am estranged from my group as a psychiatrist. This past year, I was able to successfully publish in an international journal article, an article on helping someone. It was a case history on helping someone get off of 6 psychiatric medications in a year without any withdrawal side effects or relapse. And I was like, to me, that's like a Jonathan Livingston Seagull thing where it's so out of the ordinary that people just don't believe that it's possible. So I kind of reach a certain point in my integrative psychiatry experience where I know a lot and I can do a lot, but it's a very lonely life, where you can work at a skill and keep honing it until you're really good at it and you can really help a lot of people. But then the next step is like, how can you share it with other people? That was the Jonathan Livingston Seagull thing at the end of the book, was that he wanted to share everything with other people.
Wow.
Other seagulls.
So that reminds me too of
Uh-huh.
like the Old Man in the Sea, but it sounds like a little bit better.
Oh.
Because he's the same. That
Uh-huh.
old man went out further to get the
Uh-huh.
bigger fish, which has a bigger
Uh-huh.
risk, I guess.
Ah. Yeah, I read that book too early when I was a kid too. And I didn't really appreciate the allegory of it as much as I would have had I
Yeah.
read it, when I was older. I think that's one of the, I guess, problems with being a fast reader when I was younger, is that I would push myself and read these books, but I didn't have the life experiences to truly understand, the depth of the material. I could
Yeah.
read the words, but I couldn't really grasp
Integrate.
the meaning of it in a really deep way.
Yeah, I've been enjoying
Yeah.
that a lot. Another thing I wrote down, just another book that you remind me of that I haven't read but was recommended the other day. It's called Convenience Store Clerk. And I think it's
Convenience store clerk.
because
That's the
you were talking
title of the
about,
book?
yeah.
Okay.
And I think it's a Japanese, and it was written about because you were talking about how you were jealous of the grocery bagger. And it's from the perspective of this woman who works in a convenience store, and people keep telling her she should do more with her life, and she talks about the contentment.
Oh.
And I was like, oh, that reminds me. So it's just,
You
but
know,
I
we
haven't
have
read
to
it, so I
be
can't
we
endorse
have
it.
to be careful what we wish for, because there was one day in my holistic psychiatry journey when I realized that I was a grocery bagger.
What?
I had become the grocery bagger. Well, what happened was in my holistic psychiatry journey, I kept a lot of supplements in the closets in my office, and at the end, I would recommend a certain number of supplements, and then I would grab a shopping bag and I would put the supplements in the bag. So I literally was a grocery bagger for them at the end of the session.
Yeah, but it's a little different, I think. Just a little.
I was doing it though. I realized, yep, I'm doing grocery bagging right now.
Yeah, it all comes back to that.
Yeah,
Full
whatever we
circle
set an
too.
intention for, it just shows up. Yeah.
I know I think about that in this making videos, because I went to school for film and I was really good at it on Adderall. And then when I stopped, and now here I am using those skills again to try to move this along and make videos again.
Yeah, it's gonna be a real valuable skill for sure. that it's going to be intuitive for you, to be able to do this.
Yeah. Yeah, all figuring
That's
it out.
wonderful. Yeah. Yeah. And I think you did a great job with your book too. Like, I think it must be some of your training coming through because you just went ahead and you had the editor and you got it published and had it written. So whatever you did, I think it was well informed.
Thank you. Yeah, and thank
Yeah.
you for writing the foreword.
You're welcome. I think the editing was great for that forward.
Yeah, all of it. Yeah, I got
Mhm.
really lucky with somebody who came out of the
Mhm.
woodwork and helped me. Because
Good.
I was in online forums and I was struggling with an editing situation, and someone read my post and said, "Well, that seems well written enough,
Mhm.
and I just want to help you." So it was actually someone looking to lift their career as an editor. Yeah, in New Zealand.
In New Zealand. Wow.
Yeah.
That's one country I really want to visit.
Yeah, it sounds beautiful and
Yeah.
it sounds like a paradise.
Yeah. Well, when I have all of those chapters down, I will be visiting you again and asking you for some names.
Yeah, I would love to recommend her.
Okay,
So
wonderful.
you're putting down. Can you talk? Is your book? Is it about holistic psychiatry?
I would say it's about holistic psychiatry, but in a way that's very layman oriented. Like it's not going to be like,
It's
it's
not
not going to be
for.
boring. It's not going to be boring, but it's going to be full of stories of my experiences.
Wow. Do you have
Hmm.
a title for it?
Yes, but if I share it with you, I might change it later. So just like
Okay.
you changed yours later. So we probably should just keep that title a secret for now.
Okay. I'm
Yeah.
really excited to read it when it's out.
Yeah. Well, I've been writing different versions of this book for a very, very long time, and I think part of it is finding a way to convey exactly what it is that I want to share, and becoming the kind of person that is a good match for that message. So I think I'm at that point.
Excellent.
Mhm.
Congratulations.
Well, yeah, I just have to do it. I think I've been writing all my life in the sense that ever since I was 12, I would journal.
Mhm.
So I would journal several pages quite regularly. I wouldn't say every day, but at least, a few times a week. So
Yeah,
so
me too.
over the course of my life, I've written tons of things. It's just a matter of deciding how to write it.
Yeah, and to actually, it's a different. I remember I'd written my book 5 or 6 times before I really started honing it, and I realized that's like, okay, how do I actually make this for someone else? Because
Mm-hmm.
so much of my writing is journal based, and like Julia
Mm-hmm.
Cameron's morning pages was a big
Yeah.
part of my writing
Yeah.
process, and I was like, how do
Yeah.
I make it so it's not just my own psychobabble and like actually something that other people are ready to receive?
I think that's very central. I think that's very central because I think a lot of times we write to de-stress, we write for our own benefit, we write to vent. But we're not really writing for other people most of the time. And so to be able to put yourself in someone else's shoes and care enough about the other person to do it for them, that's a whole different job, I think. And I think it's very tempting when you're writing to indulge in writing something that's kind of, it feels good for, like, for myself, when I'm writing.
Yeah.
But if you really turn the tables around, is it really helpful for that other person reading it? No, it would just, that would be the litmus test that it would fail. Like it wouldn't be that helpful to the other person. It would be kind of me venting to someone on the phone. Does that help the other person? No. So I
Mhm.
think when you say, learning how to write so that it's totally unselfish and you're doing it, even though it takes up so much time and you're doing it for someone else, wow, that's truly writing, I think.
Yeah, I realized that you're like a guest in their brain. You're
Mm.
because they're gonna be recounting your voice in their mind.
Wow, I love that. A
Yeah, and
guest in their brain. Wow.
I think I picked it up from Stephen King's On Writing, which is a great memoir about writing. But like at that
Oh,
point,
I have his book. Okay.
yeah, I don't care about any other of his books, but that one's very good.
Okay. Okay. I have
But
it in my Kindle right now. So,
yeah, because it really is like you're a guest. You're when you are reading someone's book, you're letting that writer take the space of inner dialogue. It's
mm,
very intimate. So I
yeah.
sort of coming there with reverence and, you know,
Wow. I love that. Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think so much of my life, writing has been more about a me kind of experience, even though I try really hard to think of it as something I'm contributing to society about.
Hmm.
But like, I think you have to kind of like, in order to truly write something that is inspiring for other and helpful for others, it really has to be an experience of love, and one has to feel enough. Like, it's kind of like going into that relationship, and if you never feel like you're enough and you're using that relationship to aggrandize yourself or make yourself better, it's not a really good relationship. But if you go into that relationship and you've reached a point in your life where you feel that you're enough and you're bringing everything you of yourself and your heart to that relationship, then you can develop a beautiful relationship with that person, and you can do that with your writing too. And I think that that's what I've been waiting for.
Well, it sounds like you're getting there. Yeah, that was beautiful. I mean, that to really think of it as a almost relationship between a reader and a writer.
Yeah. Well, last year, one of my poems ended up being performed on stage in DC.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, so that was great. And so my writing is starting to yeah, to be more than just, me writing on my website or something.
Yeah, I need to do that too. I worked backwards.
Yeah.
So I
Well,
looked
how do
at,
you do that?
well, I started with a whole book and now I'm like, how do I write a blog? So
Oh!
it's like going, I abandoned, the only thing I would do is write the book. So for so long, I wouldn't do social
Oh,
media. I didn't do anything. I just worked on the book. So now I'm kind
oh,
of
okay.
scrambling to make the surrounding infrastructure.
Uh-huh. Okay. Yeah, that's interesting because I just find it so much easier to write short pieces, and throw it out there. You can do it in an hour sometimes, but I find writing a book to be rather it demands a lot of perseverance and discipline from me that I hadn't. I just kind of like would start and then stop. So I think it's great that you were able to just do the big project. And in fact, one of my mentors said that when you write a book, you automatically become the expert in that area.
That's where the word authority comes from. Author.
Really
Well, that's the word where
interesting.
author comes from
Oh,
because
okay.
it's half of authority.
Wow.
And
Wow.
someone told me that because I was talking to them and I was, saying because I'm a layman, because I'm not a psychiatrist or anything like that. I was like, well, I have no authority. They're like,
Mhm.
well, yes, you do, because you wrote a
Mm,
book on it. So therefore, you're the author.
I see. I see. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I get it. Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think the book is the ultimate hurdle. If you really want to be an authority on the figure on any topic. Like I could like publish these little journal articles and stuff and have it published and peer reviewed, but until I write a book, that authority is not going to be there. So I
Hmm.
got to get going, I think,
Yeah,
for my own
I'm on
journey.
the other end. Now I have to kind of establish internet rapport. I don't know, something like this.
Uh-huh.
But I think
Okay.
also the tendency, and maybe this is part of my ADD, is I feel like it would be easier for me to like train for a marathon than run a mile a day. Like
Mm.
I get when something's really challenging, I'm like, okay, gentle things that
Oh,
I really have to
yeah.
work hard on that. I think it would be harder for me to be a grocery store clerk
Huh.
than it would
Okay.
be for me
I
to
get it.
be, yeah.
Yeah, it's like the endorphins or something that the motivating factor has to be really motivating.
But thank you, and
Oh,
thanks for sitting
yeah.
and talking with me about all this.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's been really fun, and it's been, I think, very, very helpful for me personally to be able to talk about these issues.
Yeah, and my hope is that somebody who's struggling, I guess, with Zoloft perhaps finds
Hmm.
finds this.
Yeah, yeah. I hope that people won't take quite as long to reach an understanding of medication withdrawal as I did, because it took a long time for me to actually get to a place where I realized it was withdrawal.
Yeah,
So,
I think
yeah.
I mean that's why we know each other.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Russell. I really appreciate the time that you gave for creating this podcast and inviting me to be on.
No problem. Thank you.